Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and these are Charter Moms Chats. And but this is sort of the summer edition. We're talking about issues that are especially on parents' mind during the summer. And one thing that our team and in the Charter Moms discussion group, I think families are concerned about how much their kids are using electronics because of habits they built up during the pandemic, and we're wanting to get a better balance between sort of digital life and offline life. And so we called in the experts. So we have the the team from nextTalk. And so let me introduce our guests today. So Mandy Majors and Kim Elerick are the co-hosts of the nextTalk podcast, and they offer slightly different perspectives. So Mandy is the mom of an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. And so she's been living this for a long time, since having conversations where her kids brought stuff to her attention, and she had to try to figure out how to adapt to this, how to have open conversations with your kids. And Kim has younger kids, so she has a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old. So she's living this, and I'm glad to have both of their perspectives, because I think it's a slightly different set of issues when you have younger kids and you try to prepare the conversation, whereas Mandy is having to see them graduate and go, and just hope you've done your best. So thank you, Kim, and thank you, Mandy, for I also want to mention the guest blog post. So if you click on the description in there's a link in the description of the video, it takes you to the blog post at sachartermoms.com. But I'm glad we get to have a conversation about this, about like what are sort of these after effects of the pandemic that families are experiencing, and how can we guide our kids towards better habits and be better digital parents.
Thank you for having us, Inga. We are so excited to be here.
We really look forward to talking about this, because this is kind of our world, and we usually do approach it from the older kid perspective and the younger. So hopefully we can present a balanced approach for your listeners today.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, I want to start off by asking you all to introduce nextTalk, because there may be maybe some folks who haven't heard of the organization yet, and I wanted to know, like, what's out there, and what's the mission and vision.
The mission is, in a nutshell, protecting kids online and strengthening families through open communication. Our vision statement is a little broader. It's creating a culture of honest conversation in our community to impact the world. If you don't know our history, it started with my 9-year-old asking a very highly sexualized question. She was in the 4th grade. She didn't have a phone, but she was exposed to pornography without a screen. It was through a conversation, and a kid had talked about a graphic image that he had seen the night before at home, because phones weren't allowed at our school at that time. So that was kind of my light bulb moment, that I was like, oh my gosh, my solution of not giving her a phone until she's 30 didn't keep her safe. So what am I going to do?
Yeah. And I think over the years, I think people realize, like, I mean, we realize, and Mandy, you've written for our blog before too, like just how important this is. That I think like we need to keep our kids safe online, but we can't just build walls around them. We have to have open communication, and that's the only way we're going to be able to keep them safe. So that's why I really appreciate the messages that y'all are sharing, and I want to help amplify that so that more parents have this information and they don't have to be scared. Like before we went on the air, I was talking about, I feel like I'm in like the sweaty palms phase of digital parenting, because I have a 12-year-old and a 14, almost 15-year-old. And it's like we're living it. And so I want to try to get this information out so even families with younger children can be prepared and kind of lay the foundation.
Well, and I will tell you, Mandy, starting on that journey of how am I going to protect my kids, even when they don't have screens and they were still exposed, that really was kind of the launching pad for a get together with moms, not a nonprofit. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is Mandy started with, a gathering of like 20 moms, and everybody had sweaty palms. Everybody was you, Inga. Everybody was like, what are we doing and how do we do it well? And so that really grew and grew over time and very quickly, because the need is great. And we weren't finding resources out there from people who were parenting in real time. And that's really one of the big differences for nextTalk, is there's a lot of wise and wonderful teachers and pastors and parents who have raised their kids, but it was not through the digital age, and they speak wisdom down to us. But it's like a little bit different that they haven't been in it. And then these young tech geniuses who have great ideas, but don't have kids yet. And so here we are literally, about to pick up our kids and hear all the stories and be in the mix of it. What do we do without having anyone who's parented this before? As Mandy always says, I can't call mom up and say, how did your parents Snapchat? Like, it's not going to happen. So that really, as we grew, we saw the need was great. And then the nonprofit came. And it's just been really exciting to have different resources for families and different ways that we can help support parents as they figure all this out.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important, and this in this time frame, I think it's especially important because like during the pandemic, and like kids weren't interacting face to face as much. They were doing school online, right? Sometimes messaging through learning platforms. And kids turned to like online games to have socialization if they weren't able to meet in person. And so I feel like, at least what I'm seeing my friends doing, we are doing more in-person stuff. Kids are going to go to camps this summer. They're having more face-to-face meetups, having like, park play dates and, good stuff. But I feel like that there were maybe some habits that kids built up, while things were shut down. Maybe we need to kind of reestablish some new habits. I don't know. So that's, at least that's my take on it. What are y'all observing, and what kind of guidance are you giving to families who are, experiencing like, hey, maybe we need to reevaluate what we're doing?
I mean, absolutely. This has affected my own family, So I have a 14 and an 18-year-old, and I had a conversation with them the other day, and I said, listen, we went through this pandemic and we created some all four corners of the home. This person goes here, this person goes here, and we did that for online school and work, but then it turned in for recreational too. Like, I'm going to go watch this movie in my corner. I'm going to go stream this on Netflix in my corner, and all the things, right? And so we had to have just a frank conversation about, do we need to be intentional about spending family quality time again? Because I miss you guys, and we're coming home and we're exhausted from our day because now we're doing all this in-person stuff and we're going to all of our four corners again. So what does this look like in our family? And we created a list together of things we could do, and that it was okay sometimes if we needed downtime to go to all four corners of our home like we used to during the pandemic. That's all right. But we also have to limit it and have a healthy balance, because time is passing us by. My oldest is getting ready to leave for college, and we talked about that when we were making our list. We don't want to look back when she's gone in a couple months and say, why didn't we play games? Why didn't we do something, go on a walk together like we used to, like all the things? And so just making them aware. We don't want real relationships to pass us by. I think it's just so important to make them aware of why we're trying to have the healthy balance versus just laying down the rule. We're out of control. This is what we're going to do, approaching it slightly, to bringing them into the conversation. They're part of the solution. What are your ideas?
Yeah, that really resonates. Kim, what are y'all experiencing for that? And what advice are you giving?
Very similar. What I would say is, coming out of the pandemic, we turned to screens for everything. That's where we had our play dates. That's where we had school, like you mentioned, work, everything was online, even entertainment, which before we would all sit together, pile on the couch for a movie. Since we had so many screens set up, like Mandy said, you could go anywhere and do, what you liked to do. And so some of those basic things that we have the opportunity to teach our kids, our younger kids as they're growing up, like sharing, compromise, those things that were naturally a part of the conversations because we were doing things together, they didn't really have to do as much because they could go do their own thing all the time. So that, and then turning to the screen to fix everything, boredom, whatever it might be. I need an answer for something. Instead of us having a good conversation, they would think, oh, I'm going to go look online first. And so there's all these different shifts that happen in our normal process as a family that I really saw in the pandemic. And so one of the things Mandy and I were just talking about, really reminding my kids to see beyond the screen. Like, we're looking at the screen for everything, but there's so much more to you and so much more to the world than what's right in front of you on a screen, whether it's, the laptop, the tablet, or the cell phone. You're so good at this sport. I love the way you interact, and you're such a good friend with this, little girl next door. All those, that hobby that you do when you make those bracelets, or my son, he's excellent at doing Legos. And sometimes he would forget, like, oh yeah, I do like doing other things, or my daughter, like, oh yeah, I do enjoy when we snuggle on the couch together and it becomes a family activity, not just me on my tablet. So reminding our kids to see beyond that screen, all the things that they're good at, all the things they're interested in, and all the experiences they can have if they just put it down. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, no, we've experienced that too, that, like, like if everybody picks their own show to watch, but they're all separate, then it's like we don't have things to talk about it, like, because we didn't all watch
Yes.
the same thing. And then trying to find, um, everyone's very opinionated about what their favorite shows or movies are. And then, like, the one thing we were able to compromise on was like, oh, we decided to rewatch all the Marvel movies in like their timeline order. So a friend of mine said, okay, Inga, this is the authoritative list. Do it in this order. I'm like, okay, I'll trust the expert. And then that we were able to like get everyone on the couch together and like
Mhm.
talk about those movies together. And it was different than just everybody having their own show on their own screen. But
Mhm.
it's so easy, like Mandy said, if you're tired at the end of the day and you just don't want to have that battle. But like, the sharing and the compromise, those are life skills. And like that's something like you lose those life skills if you're just giving in and letting everyone have their own screen.
That me focus really takes over in all areas of their life, especially with our younger kids. If that's all that they remember and that's what they're focused on, because we're not reworking the way that we run our home after the pandemic, it can become an issue.
Yeah, and it's almost like you have to have, like, some way to interrupt the screen time so that they reflect on, like, "Oh, yeah, I do love this craft. I do love
Totally.
building Legos." I'm lucky this hasn't been an issue as much in our house, but, like, I've heard of some families, like, where kids will, like, they'll get really emotional if you interrupt their screen time, that they'll act, like, not like themselves, like, and it can be a little scary, like, you're not sure who you're talking to.
And that's a warning sign. Sometimes we get asked about screen guidelines, and that's a tough one, because first you have to define, like, what do you what constitutes a screen time. Because sometimes, like family movie time, playing the Nintendo Switch together as a family, is that count as your screen time? In our home, we really say screen time is when that child is by themselves on a tablet, like scroll, playing an app. My son, he's 14, he's a big gamer. I don't count screen time. If he's online playing with his friends and connecting, and I hear them talking about science in between the games or whatever, I don't necessarily get really upset about that. Now, if he goes into the game room and spends 2 hours by himself playing games, that's a whoa, whoa, whoa. But another red flag is just what you mentioned, Inga. If you're seeing, when you say turn off a screen and there's anger, or and sometimes, yes, they're in the middle of a game, and I understand emotions are high, but if this is a normal common reaction when you ask them to turn off a screen, that's just like a red flag. My kid struggles with this a little bit more, and I have to pay attention. One of the things we also tell parents is, we throw out this term screen addiction, and it's a real thing. Real people struggle with it, kids and adults. But be careful labeling your kid an addict. We like to say the difference is a stronghold versus an addiction. And most people, kids included, screens have a stronghold on us. And we have to admit that. We have to say, what is the stronghold? What do I struggle with? And when you allow that kind of space for the kids to be like, okay, I don't have to adopt a label that I'm an addict, because addict really should be reserved. I mean, that's a serious word. We don't want to overuse it, like bullying, words like that. We don't want to
Mhm.
overuse them because they lose their importance. So, what we want to do is give the kids space to say, my Facebook has a stronghold on me. I'm constantly checking it. When notifications pop up, I struggle with that. Do you do that with your Xbox? Do you think Xbox has a stronghold on you? So that way we're talking and making them aware we want to make them advocates for themselves, that we want them to see the problem themselves instead of us just saying, you have a problem, you're losing your temper. If your kid loses your temper, I think the way to, and I can say this because my kids have lost their temper, the way to approach it that I've learned that's better is this: hey, do you think that screen's making you angry? Why did you just yell at me like that? Like, can we talk about that? And sometimes you cannot say that in the heat of the moment because they need a minute. They need a minute to come off of their anger. Don't try to engage them when their anger level is a 10. I had a counselor tell me once, wait till they're back to a 2 or 3 before you try to engage in a good conversation. But this is a perfect example, Inga. I'm glad you brought it up about the emotions because I struggle. If my husband says, Mandy, can you put that down? Like, I feel myself getting like, you don't even know what I'm doing over here. I'm helping a mom, like you get defensive, but we all have a stronghold. Screens have a stronghold on us. And if we can admit that with our kids and allow them this space in a non-shaming way to say, this is what I struggle with. My kids could tell you right now, my son struggles with gaming and my daughter struggles with social media. That's their stronghold, and they work it out. They're figuring it out.
I would add to that a little bit. That's so great, Mandy. When they're identifying that when they're younger, sometimes they have a hard time with the words. And so helping younger kids identify and put words to their emotions is so helpful when, again, they're not at a 10. So maybe you're just at dinner or you're hanging out or you're in the car and you talk about how that feels to you when you are dealing with your stronghold. So for example, if I am like, texting is my stronghold. I love to stay connected to my friends and all the things. And I can be texting like way too much, as my family will tell you. And so if I say to my, when daddy says, could you put your phone down? Inside, it feels a little bit like a fire. And that feeling for me is anger or resentment or frustration. And giving them the words that match the feeling sometimes helps because they'll feel all of this when they're younger, but they don't know how to put it into words to explain, hey, I need help with this. And so give them some really easy examples, describe the feeling. And then when it happens, you'll be surprised. I've had my kids so many times come down and say, I'm feeling the fire, or I'm feeling that anger. And now they're a little bit older and they know when it's time to turn things off on their own because we started young. And so now they're able to recognize, oh, okay, I've been doing this for too long. I need to turn it off. And that's such a parenting win when you get to the point where they are self-regulating, like Mandy talked about, and they identify, I need a break.
Yeah, like I've observed, like it's almost like too many videos that play one right after the other, and then it can put you in a feeling of like a dazed feeling, and
Yes.
then and then you feel like you have no energy to do anything. But it's like, why do you have no energy? You haven't been doing anything. And then so like I felt that myself, and I've been able to talk to my daughter about it, and like because like us trying to impose the structure, like that's not going to work. But like if we could give them the tools, like Kim said about naming those feelings, and then how they can recognize that and regulate themselves, like that's setting them up to be independent in the future, right? So that maybe when they're in college, they will be able to turn off the gaming console and go to class because that's important, right?
I mean, we've
Yeah.
heard the stories where kids get to college and they flunk out because mom or dad aren't there to say your screen limits are up. So, I mean, screen limits are great when they're little. They need more regulation, but the goal is to wean them off so that they can determine this is not healthy for me. I've spent way too much time. This is making me angry. We want to move them into self-regulation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, these are great examples, and I want to remind people that there's more good stuff in the guest blog post. There's also great stuff at nexttalk.org. I want to go back to something that we talked about earlier about the open communication. Like Mandy, you were talking about even though your daughter didn't have a phone and there were no phones at school, and yet she still had all these questions, and that I feel like summer is an opportunity to, lay the foundation for that open communication. So, what kinds of advice do you have for parents? Like hopefully in the summer, we're not just, rushing from school to sports to dinner to bedtime, and we have more time to, be available, I guess.
Absolutely. I love this. You do. You have more time. Think about your kids' ages and think about, okay, what do I need to start covering with them? What are words that I need to start throwing out there? If you have a child who has a phone and you've never talked about porn, you need to talk about porn and you need to say the word. If they're old enough to have a phone, they're old enough to say the word porn. That's kind of my philosophy there. So say to them, maybe you're swimming. It's just you and your kid, or maybe you're out playing basketball this summer, whatever you do. Have you ever heard the word porn? Have your friends ever shown you porn? Sometimes if we just are able to say to our older kids, hey, I know what that is, ripping the Band-Aid off. You can tell me. It opens up some conversation. And I know Kim's going to come in here with some tips on the younger sides of kids, because she always does on the podcast. This is what we do on our podcast. I'm talking about an older child. She's going to come in and tell you with younger kids how to start some of these conversations.
Well, I think one of the most important things that we spend a lot of time discussing with parents is, how do you start talking with your kids? Because that's that first barrier. Like, well, what do I say? And when do I say it? And where do I say it? And that starts with some observation. Like, when is my kid most open to talking? And maybe it's at night. Mandy for so many years has talked about crawling into bed with her daughter. My daughter's the same. Like, I could be with her the whole day, just her and I. But it's not until night, when I'm exhausted, that she's like, oh, mommy, let's talk. And so she will just talk and talk and talk, and it'll all come out. And so recognizing when your kid opens up is the first most important thing, because that's when they're going to share things with you. And when you get a chance to speak into them. I have another kid. We got to be doing something active. Like, we'll go for a walk or we'll play basketball. And it just, for some reason, those endorphins and getting out there and moving around, he just will start talking. And so recognize your kids' talk time. That's the first thing. And summer's a great time for that too. You have more time to do that, and and your kids may be more relaxed and willing to open up. And then you don't have to overexpose them when they're younger to introduce hard topics. Like, when we started on this, my daughter was itty bitty, still a baby. But my kids have grown up in a nextTalk family, and we've talked about all the things in age appropriate ways. And so a lot of times your kids will say something, like they may come home and say, I heard the word sex today. It's really important first not to overexpose and not to jump on them, but to say, tell me where you heard it. Use it in a sentence. You want to make sure of the context first. And then when you're having these types of conversations, only share what they're asking and what's appropriate for their age when you start it out. And then you can even say, hey, there's some more meaning to this. There's other ways that this is used, or other things that this mean, but I'm not sure that you're ready for that yet. But if you find yourself thinking about it, well, you promise mommy you'll come back and talk to me, because I will always tell you the truth and I want you to hear it from me. And so those big topics like, porn or different sexuality questions that might come up from watching TV or commercials, you want to answer them, but you don't have to say too much, but you can let them know. You'll tell them everything they need to know when the time is right, or if they're still thinking about it, and always make sure that you do.
Yeah, yeah. No, that I was thinking about I think for my kids, sometimes when we're driving is when I kind of put them on the spot
Yes.
a little bit, but I also try to keep it short, like, because like, don't, like, if they start to get embarrassed, it's like, okay, right. But that's a good, like, in the car, like a good captive audience. And then Kim, you were talking about walking. Like, I realized, like, that's when I talk to my dad who's 87.
Ah,
But that's when I mean, he's always been there for me. Like, if I'm stressed out or I'm trying to map out how to solve a tricky problem, like, that's when we work stuff out. And I think yeah, when we walk, sometimes it's a little early in the morning. My daughter's not quite awake yet, but I think that might turn into one of her talking times too. Is like, just
yeah.
getting moving.
And remember, they change. And so what works for some seasons, it's not going to work the next season. So we also have to be flexible and be observant of when they're talking, and change with your kid. Change with your kid.
Yeah,
Well, and I'll just add to that. When we talk about these conversations, it's not a lecture. It's not us talking for 5 minutes straight. It's a real conversation. Where did you hear that? Give me an example. You want to gather context really first and see what's going on in their little heart and mind. And it may take a day or two for you to kind of process and think, okay, you know what? They may be struggling with this. I may need to circle back to this topic because of something they said. And so you just want to gather as much context as you want. I mean, these are real conversations. There's not a script to follow because your kids are going to ask different things than my kids, but it's just a real engaging way to kind of figure out what are you thinking about? What's going on in your little heart and mind? What are new words that you've heard that, you may need help defining or understanding?
Oh, and don't be weird.
Don't
Mandy
be
and
weird.
I say that all the time.
Don't
We're
be
like, don't
weird.
be a weirdo. Because sometimes our kids will ask us something and we're like, and we freak out and we start sweating and all of those things. And you may still do that, but just try to keep it inside. We call it crazy parent mode. Try to keep that on lockdown, because if you freak out when your kids ask you something or start talking about something, or you can't say the words, like if you can't say the actual words for body parts, then your kids are going to see that you're nervous and they're not going to want to ask you about things anymore. So calm down, be normal, and just try to answer them like you would in a normal conversation.
Practice your parent filter. That first automatic cuff response is, thank you so much for asking me. Thank you so much for asking me. And it may be, can I think about this and come back to you tomorrow and us talk about it? And that way you have just a minute to gather your thoughts and what you're going to say. You may have an answer right away. My personal rule though, is I always go back in 24 hours, because a lot of times what I see happening is parents will say, let me think about what to say. And then they never go back to it. And then what we're saying to our kids are, your questions aren't important to me. Your kid is out there waiting. Sometimes you get really lucky and you go back to them and say, okay, I'm ready to talk about this. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. I don't care anymore. And you're like, yes, I delayed it for a minute. But oftentimes they're waiting. They want to know what your response is. And so again, just making them feel like, I heard you. You're seen in this home. Your questions are important. I want to be your source. I want to be your Google. That's what we want to convey to our kids.
And it is okay to laugh, and it is okay to be silly. That helps a lot too. Especially we're in the phase right now of understanding what all the slang words mean. And let me tell you, there is a lot of laughing, and because it's funny. And a lot of times as parents, we think, oh, this is very serious. I have got to train up my child to know that we don't use this word, which is true, but it's also funny. And your kids can relate to you more. And that brings down their guard also, when you can make light of it a little bit too.
You're going to find yourself, I'm telling you, I tell Kim this all the time. You're going to find yourself dancing to slang words and saying the slang words that you never thought you would allow in your home.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of allowing them to say it. And they know, you don't say this outside of our home. This is not appropriate. I'm so glad you asked me. Okay, let's make up a fun rap about it, because this is a weird, weird slang word. That's the kind of, just a fun, safe place. That's what we want to provide for our kids.
Yeah, that's like how we react to them teaches them like that we're receptive, right? Like if we freak out too much, then they're not gonna want to come to us. But if we can like just hold it in, right, and say thank you for asking me about this, right? And even if we have to buy time, right? But just like stay calm enough. Yeah. And well, one of the things in the guest post, in the blog post, you talk about like giving kids guidance about when to report something. And so I was wondering, can you kind of talk about that? Like what should parents like, because like we're I don't know, it's not something like we said, we can't just lecture for 5 minutes, right? And like Kim said, like we have to start young, we have to keep it age appropriate and keep it simple. But like how do we, put sort of like indicate to kids like, hey, this is when something is more serious and you should come to us and ask.
So, as your kids, if you're creating a good culture in your home of real open communication, you're going to know all the things. You're going to know what's going on in the neighbor's house. You're going to know what's going on. I mean, you're going to have a lot of information to hold. And this is I think this is the hardest part about being a nextTalk family, to be quite honest, when to report and when not to report. Because if you report everything, then you become, again, it loses its impact because you're screaming about everything, right? And so there are some just key things that we say we have to get involved. So if a child is, suicidal or hurting themselves or being bullied, and so there's a safety situation, anything like that, being touched inappropriately, making comments about touching or trying to touch other children, and we see red flags, things like that are just big red flags. With my older kids, and even with younger kids, you need to be careful about how you get involved and how you report, because we want to take them along. Old Mandy probably would have just texted everybody, posted it on Facebook, like get everybody involved, PTA. New Mandy is basically learning to say to my kid, hey, this could save this kid's life. And I know that kids who tell get bullied. I know that. So I want to protect you. But right now, we got to do the right thing because it's the right thing. So here are some options. I can email the school counselor and ask that your name be kept out of it, but you have to know you may get dragged into it. Or, we can text this anonymous number. A lot of school districts have anonymous text numbers that are great for this type of situation, because then you can just make sure, okay, school counselor called this kid down, they're aware, and then they will handle it from then on. We've done all we need to do. We don't need to gossip. We don't need to get involved. We don't need to follow up with the counselor. As long as we know the kid is getting help and an expert or a professional is involved that needs to be involved. But I think this is a sticky situation. We have to be careful with it. We just don't want to betray our kids' trust in the process of it. And then they feel like, I'm never telling mom or dad anything again. Right. And so that's where I say, bring them along. And then it empowers them. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been able to go back to my kids and say, like, you may have saved this person's life. I'm so proud of you. Or I see how you really helped this person. They're struggling and they don't have anybody to talk to. And, we were able to help them, get them help that they need. So use it as an empowerment tool for them to speak up when they need to speak up.
Yeah.
I think with some of, the younger kids, when you're thinking about that, maybe you're saying, well, we haven't had any of those like life-threatening situations yet, but maybe one of the kids on the team, the football team, is saying the F word a whole bunch and it's really bothering my kid. This is a perfect example of building that foundation that Mandy's talking about, where your kid feels safe telling you things and you're not announcing it to the world. We say, don't broadcast their business. So let's say my kid comes home and says, this kid is saying the F word, they're saying mean things, and it's really upsetting me. In the past, I might have said, well, I'm going to call the coach right now. I'm going to do the parent thread, and I'm going to say, this kid is doing this, and it is very upsetting. And I still see that a lot. And I understand where that comes from, because we want to protect our kid. We want to stand up for them. This is, why is this happening? They're young. Now I say, oh my goodness, I would be frustrated with that too. I sit with my kid and turn all that energy and focus onto my kid. How can I help you with this? What would you like to see done here? Would you like mommy to reach out to the coach? Do you just need to tell me and vent about it and get it out? And we talk about what that word means or how it makes you feel and why we don't say it. It's more a refocusing of my time and energy, as where it used to be outward. Now it's me and my kid. How can I help you? And sometimes it is, mom, can we email the coach? But then, like Mandy said, I'm taking them along for that process and that journey, and we're doing it together. And they don't feel blindsided that mom's telling everybody without me knowing. And so you can start that young with things that aren't that important, so that by the time they get older, and it is things like suicide and different things, maybe in elementary and middle and high school, they already know I can trust mom to help me with this really difficult situation.
Yeah, I really like that approach, because I feel like it's helping the kids build resilience rather than having them look always towards an adult to come in and solve the problem for them.
Yes.
And so that's like setting the stage for them to advocate for themselves and being resilient for themselves, so they have these skills. Whether it's when they're in college and maybe you don't know as much about the day to day, or they're in their workplace and there's harassment in the workplace, and then they have a toolkit for how to solve that, and not and they can do it independently of an adult that they it's like we want to be there for a sounding board, but like you said, it's important to differentiate between, do they just want to talk it through, or are they actually asking for help? And then if they are asking for help, it's more like us coaching them on what steps to take, rather than saying, here, I'll fix this for you.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and in their world of social media where you comment on everything, it teaches them like what's important to get involved on here. Like what's a hill I'm willing to die on, or what is something that's super important that I need to be involved in here versus a time suck, really. Like I'm just debating to be debating. You know, it helps them figure that out too. Just like you said, resilience in all these different situations, the workplace, their future relationships, all of it.
Yeah. And I think the impulse to share, like, sometimes if we have information, it feels powerful because it's like, "Ooh, I know this and other people don't." But that can cause damage in a community. But, like, just getting information to the person who can help, right? Whether it's a counselor or something, like, but then being discreet about it and, like, not taking credit and not saying, like, "Ooh, I'm the person who's in the know." Like, that's a much more, like, mature way to deal with situations. And frankly, there's a lot of adults who still need to work on that skill because, like, social
Yes.
media reinforces a kind of narcissism and
Mhm.
oh, look at me, or look, I'm special, I have this information. But that's not what it's about, right? It's not about, like, the our own status. It's about, like, how do we have a healthier community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why what we're seeing, this started as honestly, 9 years ago. My daughter's 18 now. Kind of started, my daughter and I were joking the other day. She's like, I was kind of like an experimental rap blast. I was like, you were, because going into this, I eventually let her earn social media. She got a phone. She earned one social platform at a time. We walked through each one of them at a time. And I was trying to figure out on my own, how do I really keep her safe? How do I really keep her safe with all this information that she has available at her fingertips, with or without a phone? And what's been so amazing is, I have learned the solution is not to avoid these 10 apps or to lay down the law. The solution is literally that relationship that you're building with your kid, that healthy dialogue. I mean, we call it open communication. You can call it whatever you want. But all these years, and now I'm seeing, oh my gosh, it's changing the way she interacts with her teachers and her and I wasn't that smart to figure it out, but that's that community effect that nextTalk has, because we start out in the homes. That's where we started, and now we're in churches and schools, and now we're seeing the ripple effect of these kids who have been brought up with this healthy dialogue, learning to label their feelings, like Kim was saying, and then deal with them, learning the healthy balance with screen, learning when to interact on social media and not, when to get involved in real situations and when to just back off and be like, okay, that's not a big deal. They're learning all this, and it's changing our community. It's changing there's a ripple effect there. And so what a testament that we as parents, the work that we do is the most important job in the world. Most important
Yeah,
job. Sorry,
I
I went on a
completely
whole
agree.
tangent there.
Yeah, no, it's really
But
important. Well,
moms, dads, your jobs are so important. And I know it's
Yes.
hard. I know it's hard. But that's why we have organizations like Inga's and to come alongside you and help you and give you resources. That's what we're here for. We're all in it with you because your job is so important.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, and actually that leads into, I think one of the great parts of the blog post is, encouraging families. Well, I guess, like, one note, I think when people see a topic like this, they're going to expect, like, oh, well, there's this thing you could download and it blocks this and it locks this down. And, I think people sometimes are looking for that technology solution, but it's really not a technology solution. It's a people solution, and it's a relationship solution. That's what's going to keep your kids safe. Like, there's no like magic thing to download. And I'm sure there's lots of people trying to make money selling products that do stuff, but what really keeps your kids safe is just if they know that they can come and ask about something, if something is stressing them out.
That's another big lesson I've learned over 9 years. When we got her a phone, I wanted that app. I wanted that monitoring subscription that was going to do everything I needed to do. And there are some great ones out there, and they are tools. And I say, use them. You use everything at your disposal to keep your kids safe. But what you
Yeah.
don't do is you pay $9.99 a month and say, well, that's it. I'm parenting the digital world. Because there are loopholes, and it gives you a false sense of security. I mean, the biggest loophole is, I can go into all the tech and privacy law loopholes, but that's a whole other conversation. The biggest loophole is they know you're monitoring their phone. So if they want to hide something from you, they'll use a friend's phone, whether it's school, church, a neighbor's house. That's what they do. They're smarter than us digitally. And so it does go back to that, spending your time and energy on the relationship with your kid. Wi-Fi routers are important, but if you're spending more time researching your Wi-Fi router than talking with your kid, we got a problem. There's a red flag there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, and there's times to get off the phone, right? And then, like earlier, like Kim talked about, having quality time, family quality time that's planned, like coming up with a set of activities and, that, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. And well, that there's times for screens. And then there's times when like we need to like deliberately set things aside and like not have everybody be in their corners. Like Mandy said, like we all had our digital corner. We could get our digital life done during the pandemic, but now it's time to come back together. So what are some of the ideas that y'all mentioned in the post, and just some any ideas about like what should we do to like put the screens down and then do stuff together as a family?
Well, I tell you, I think it's sometimes easier than we think. Your kids like to do things. I mean, if you really think about it, we forget too, because it's easy just to plop down and get on our phones and get on a device. And I get it. Like after a long day of work or cleaning all the things that parents are responsible in a day, it's easier just to default to a screen and be like, okay, everybody be quiet and do your thing, right? But if you really think about it, and if you give your kids a chance to tell you, I promise you, they will come up with a bunch of stuff they want to do. And you can, like Mandy did, you can make a list and post it up on the fridge and refer to it. Hey, let's do this tonight, or schedule it. I'm very big on scheduling things, like on my planner. That helps me to keep my brain straight. And so we will schedule things out, and then my kids really look forward to it. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. You can have screen-free days. We try to do like Sundays and then one day during the week where the phone goes up and we just have some time where we're doing anything and everything that's not on a screen. And prepare yourself. Like the first few minutes, your kids are going to be like, all the things, all the drama. And then what usually happens in our house is they'll disappear. And then we get a whole puppet show, a few hours later. And they're like, we forgot how fun this was. Or they'll be like, let's go on a family bike ride. And we have a great time. And, we go exploring or do something. It just takes a minute for that transition to happen where they switch back over to like, oh, that's right, I do have other interests. And then they're all into it. It just takes that intentional conversation of we can do better and we can do more. And it comes easily once you open it up.
Yeah. And we can, the summer is a time when we can resolve like, okay, we're going to kind of re-examine our habits and, reintroduce, some of these activities that we used to do before everything went digital.
Look back at your pictures. That I do that sometimes, like with the Facebook memories. I'm like, oh, we did that. Yes, that was so fun. There's just, I also want to, this is not off topic, but I want to encourage the moms of younger kids. I meet moms all the time. In fact, I live in a cul-de-sac with a bunch of really young moms who are terrified of technology. They're just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so we talk about it a lot. And my 12-year-old just got a cell phone this year. And I will tell you, because we took the time and energy to spend in creating that culture of conversation in our home and that safe place, and he knows that this is how we operate, it hasn't been scary. In fact, it's been really fun. And he's got a great understanding of boundaries and being able to say, like, you know what? It's time for me to put this down and let's go outside. And that came from all those intentional conversations. That came from setting those examples. And so it feels a lot of times like for parents, they'll say, my kids are too young to start this. We don't have any of this technology yet. They just have tablets or whatever. Start now. The younger, the better that you create these foundations. Then all these things we're talking about that are kind of harder as they get older, like reminding them of other things they can do. And it comes easier just because it's all that they know. That's all that they know, is that this is the kind of home we have.
Yeah. So like, don't avoid it entirely, but
Yeah.
have the conversations, and then build towards the kind of having self responsibility and independence that,
Yep.
that Mandy's big kids are getting.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and on that note, we kind of describe it where we love preventative stuff here at nextTalk. And we're playing off what Kim said. If you think of a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is crisis families, and they contact us a lot. My kid is addicted to porn. And I use the word addicted because it's true there. My kid is being sexually abused. My kid is, gaming all day, all night, won't turn it off. Those are crisis situations. What we are trying to do at nextTalk is reach families over here at 1, 2, and 3 on this scale. And that is when your kids are young. That is years before they get a phone, years before they're going to be interacting with strangers on the Xbox. We're trying to do this preventative stuff over here at 1, 2, and 3. So like when Kim said, when the day does come from a phone, they have all these years of knowing, they were playing that 4+ app and there was an F-bomb on a teddy bear shirt and they came and told you and you were okay with it. Like not okay with it, but thank you for telling me. And you didn't throw the tablet in the trash like I used to have done, which is wrong, by the way. Don't do that. Don't do what old Mandy did, right? But they have, you are building this foundation years before they get on technology. And that's really our passion. And I think that's how we're going to get ahead of this curve. Because right now we're dealing with a lot of 10s because we were all thrown into this. Kids got technology and we had no good resources for how to manage it. And nextTalk is trying to kind of undo all that and change the next generation. So yes, they're on screens. Yes, they have social media, but it's healthy. We're not at 10 crisis because we've done all this prep work when they were little bitty over at 1, 2, and 3. And so that's kind of how we can summarize the mission of nextTalk even a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I know I say my palms are not as sweaty. I feel like I'm and it's an ongoing thing. It's not done, but but it's good. Like I think this is a good time to stop and reflect and think about what habits does our family have? What can we do a little differently this summer? How do we build up the open communication so that we don't get into a crisis or like whatever comes down the road, like we're ready to handle it.
Yeah, and I know Kim kind of talked to the younger moms and said, don't be scared, you can do this. And that's 100%, we're there. But I also want to talk, if you have parents of older kids and you're like, oh my gosh, we're near an 8 or a 9, we're nearing a crisis mode, we messed some. I really want to encourage you. I have seen so many families, mine included, bad things have happened online because we weren't prepared for them and we responded badly. And how we can turn that around. We can say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry I didn't prepare you for this. I didn't know I needed to. But you also have to take responsibility for what you're doing online. So we need a reset. I have seen so many bad situations turn around and open communication just create this place of forgiveness in the relationship and acknowledgement of what each party has missed and just a regrouping. And I want to encourage those parents out there too, because if we're honest, we've all missed it. We've all missed something in the cyber parenting world because it's caught us off guard. And the more we can, I don't want to shame anybody who's missed it. I want to say, I missed it too. Come alongside. Let's learn together. Let's figure this out together. Because that's the real message here. I totally messed this whole thing up. Yeah. And I want to use my mistakes to get people to understand these, especially these preschool and early elementary years. I missed them with my oldest. I missed them. And I wish I could have gotten him back because I started it early with my son and I saw the difference in him immediately as to how he was talking to me way more. And so again, we just want to encourage you. You can do this. And if you've missed it like I have, there is still hope.
Yeah. Kim, do you have more thoughts about advice for younger families? And then I want to close out by encouraging folks how to keep up with nextTalk.
Well, I promise this is not a shameless plug, but Mandy's book is so good. And if you have time over the summer, she has 2 books, but Talk, is so good in that it gives some real clear ideas and direction on how to start these conversations and guidelines that you can set up in your family, like examples of guidelines that you can use, even starting at a young age. And it's just one of those things that you'll end up tabbing. So you can go back to like, oh, I remember she said this. That was so good. And what I want to say to younger families, if you're reading that and you can have it in your head and be praying through it or thinking through it before these things happen, then it won't take you so off guard. And I have messed up. I mess up every day. Let me just be honest here. But also I'm always saying, I'm sorry, kids. Like I didn't handle that right. And I think if we can start that early too, that's so helpful that our kids see us messing up, but not giving up. And I think that's a great example that we can set for our little people. And, starting with these clear guidelines at a young age, it's really fun to see that just become a part of their standard operating procedure. One of my favorite pictures of my daughter, she was 5. She ran down the hall to go to the bathroom, and I happened to walk by the bathroom door, and she had her little tablet sitting outside of the door, leaned against the wall, because she had heard from a very young age, we don't do tablets or any screens in bedrooms or bathrooms. And it just is a part of her normal operating procedure. So now her brother, who has a phone, will see that outside of the door. We don't have to talk about it anymore because that's just what we do. And so some of those real simple things that you can start young, build this wonderful foundation for your kids that make all these harder conversations come a lot more natural. So start now, start young. Don't be afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great advice, and I think this is something that, I hope families take a lot away from, like, this interview and from the guest blog post and, like, the earlier post that Mandy gave us, but it's something to kind of keep revisiting and keep checking up. So, can y'all share more about, like, where, how families can, keep getting updates on this, where they find more resources?
Well, our website, nexttalk.org, and also social media. We post every day on social media. We just use it as a platform to educate, encourage, empower, all the things. So every day we're posting over there. Some are geared towards younger kids, some are geared towards older kids. We hit all the markets over there. At our website, you can see our number one resource is our podcast. Kim and I do a podcast. We've got over 250 shows. You can click there and go through it. Lots of great information over there. If you're struggling with a certain topic, if you can't find what you're looking for, contact us through our website. We would love to hear from you. We get moms contacting us all the time that need help and have you covered this subject? We also have a 9-week video study. It's faith-based. So a lot of churches use it, but it's on our website as well. So lots of resources over there for you to check out.
Yeah, and then so for anyone listening on the podcast, the website, it's nexttalk.org, so nexttalk.org, and on social media, so let's see, so Facebook and Twitter, it's at nexttalk, nexttalk, on Instagram, add the org, so nexttalk.org on Instagram. But yeah, I agree. You guys are a great follow on social media, and the podcast is it's I think we've captured a little bit of it here. Like it's such a natural conversation between the two of you, and like you're both so candid about your own family experiences, and you're offering, slightly, like Mandy's talking more for families with older kids. Kim has the perspective of being in the trenches, like with the young kids, and and just offering advice. And I know, like, as a church moms, like our group is a whole range of ages, but a lot of it is families who are trying to figure out what to do about preschool and kindergarten, up through the early elementary years. And I think that's a really key time to be laying the foundation for open communication. And summer is a great time to build these habits and, establish screen guidelines, and then do things as a family that don't necessarily involve screens.
Absolutely. And, one of the things we see at our organization, we've got families who work at our organization in private, public, homeschool. We got all a range of different schools. And one of the things we often say to parents is the online world is everywhere. My kid wasn't allowed to have screens at their school lunch table, but she still was exposed. So this is something that we all need help with. No matter where your kid goes to school or where they go to church or, this is happening to good families or not, this is happening to all of us. So if we can come together and really help each other out, understand and have relevant conversations with our kids, I mean, that is the key.
Yeah. Yeah. Kim, do you want to close this out? A final thought?
It's
I'm putting you on
worth the
spot.
work. And sometimes we feel like, man, I don't know if I can do this. It's scary. It's different. It's new. It's hard. I'm exhausted. A lot of times that's how I feel, like I'm just tired. But I will tell you, there are those moments where your kids come to you and ask you a question that you know they never would have asked you before. Or you have a conversation where you're able to talk through some really difficult things and pour into them what you believe and what you know is important for them to know. And they are able to talk to you and share their little thoughts. And you realize in that moment, okay, this is good. This is what this is all worth, or what this was all about. And so it's worth it. Have that cup of coffee so you can crawl in bed with them at night, go on that extra walk. And as Mandy can tell you now that she's got a kid graduating, every single one of those conversations was worth the time and the energy and the effort. Your job is so important, parents, like she said, so important. And this is really one of the best cornerstones of being a parent, is creating that culture of open communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can do it in our families, and then our kids can go out and build, communities where, people are,
Absolutely.
kinder and using the digital world in a better way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for the guest post. Thank you for the conversation. I'm looking forward to the event this summer. I know I didn't talk about that, but we'll be sharing about that online in our channels. So, yeah, thank you for what you do through nextTalk and how many families you're helping.
Thank you so much, Inga. And thank you for all you do. Your organization, you are equipping parents, and all this research that we would have to do on our own, you're doing it for them. And equipping, I mean, that helps, because then they have more time to pour into this relationship we're talking about. So, this is this is all a team effort. So
Yes.
thank you for all that you do as well.
Thank you, Inga.
Yeah.
Awesome work. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.